Hello, this is a lecture under the Sorted course for Module 3. It's called around communication after publication, part of the knowledge management part, and this is really around sharing the data that was used in your research paper. And in Sorted, we've made a choice to recommend that we use FigShare in order to share our data, and I'm going to talk you through how to do that. So why do you need to deposit your data? Well, I think providing access to your data actually completes the research process, and it ensures transparency and accountability in the work that we've done. I think that's very important in public health. And it also enables others to replicate your work or perhaps include it in other bigger analysis if the data set is appropriate. Many journals, and including the international medical journal editors and many funders, including TDR and WHO, now require the research that it supports to actually have a data management plan, so a statement about how the data will be shared and accessed by others. And that usually involves providing the data or putting it somewhere in a repository so that it can be accessed by others and describing when that access will take place. Now, there are many issues to do with sharing research data, and particularly with biomedical data. We're not going to have a whole discussion on that here. What we're going to do is concentrate on what it is you need to do for Sorted. And as I said, we're going to recommend the use of the free online repository FigShare. So how do I deposit my data? Well, the first step is check what rights and what permissions you actually have over the data, and make sure that you've got the appropriate clearance from your institute to do that. And I think this is particularly important for those of you that are working within, say, a government setting. So make sure, do you have the permission and the right to deposit data, put it in the public domain? And does that data contain anything that might be sensitive? So that could be politically sensitive, but often what we're thinking about is, does it contain any personal information, any identifiers, anything that would be on a medical record that could be linked to an individual, because that would be a terrible breach of privacy and confidentiality, and we really don't want to do that. If the data was collected under consent, was the consent broad? Did it allow for secondary uses? And do I need, therefore, to clean the data? That means remove identifiers, remove names, remove emails, and such like. And then it's a question of timing. So what we will need to do is deposit the data prior or just about the same time as you submit the final version of your manuscript. And that's important because what depositing your data will do is give you a web link reference so that somebody can actually find your data set in the repository. So what data do I deposit? If it's difficult to get the permissions or the data is quite sensitive, then what we recommend is that you deposit what's called the metadata. And the metadata is a summary, so it gives somebody a very good idea of what the data was, what it covers, what analysis could be done with it. But more importantly, it gives you this web link reference, the DOI, so that others can find that. And then in the paper, the manuscript that you submit, you invite researchers to contact the corresponding author to discuss any secondary analysis. And that is not ideal, but sufficient to satisfy WHO and TDR at the moment with data management plans. Ideally, yes, we would love to share the data set that you used in your analysis. And if there's no sensitive data, then we go ahead and deposit the full data set. Be aware, though, of course, that deposition of only those data that was used for your analysis and that was covered by the ethics approval that you obtained. So if you're using a subset of a larger database, make sure that you only include the data under the ethics approval that you obtained for your research. Check that it's cleaned of any sensitive data, and then we can move ahead and deposit in FigShare. So what is FigShare? Well, FigShare is an online resource. It's a registry of for digital material. Nice for us, of course, it's free to register, and it provides a permanent archive of your information. It is free, but it has a limit of that free use, which is up to 20 gigabytes, and we think that'll be plenty for Sortit's needs. But if your data set somehow is much larger than that, then contact us at TDR, and we'll have to have a rethink about where we could put the data. What it gives you is this thing called a DOI, a digital object identifier. And this is a unique and permanent URL to your data that you then use in your data management plan statement in your paper. And then as an aside, I mean, you may be interested to know that anything you have copyright over, so your own photos, PowerPoints that you've created, posters, papers, they can all be stored in this resource, and you can provide links to others to see them. So that may be of interest to you. And certainly many of the leading universities around the world are now creating institutional subscriptions so that they can support ongoing research collaboration and share things. If you're interested to know more, it's quite a good little video here on the FigShare website. It'll tell you more about the broader picture of what they do. So how do we go about this? Well, the first thing is, in order to deposit your data in FigShare, is you need to register first. That's very straightforward. You just create an account and you need a live and active email to do that. Once you've done that registration, you'll then be invited to log in. And when you log in, this is the page you come to. And as you can see, it's very straightforward. You go straight to the deposition page. There are 4 tabs. You want to make sure that you are on My Data tab because that's the one that we'll be using. We're not working in projects or collaborations or other types of activity. There are 2 or 3 routes to depositing. You can literally just take a file and drop it in this box, and then it'll be on the site. And then subsequently you add information to it. My preference, though, is to actually create a new item first and then share the data because I think that makes a lot more sense. So first of all, we just go to the checklist. So once you create a new item, you then you'll be given a checklist of the information that you need to describe your data. Now, as I said, if you only have permission to share a summary, or what we call the metadata, then tick this box first, and then this will give you a different section or different choices of what you need to answer to provide that. When you enter into each of these boxes, a little tip section comes up on the right-hand side. It's pretty good. Read it, it's useful, and then you'll know that you're doing the right thing. Go through the different boxes. They're fairly self-explanatory. So the authors, this would be just you in this case. In the category, it covers all of our subject areas, so agriculture, health science, environment. And then there's a subcategory. As with all these lists, they're never quite perfect. So just choose the one that's close enough. It doesn't need to be 100% exact. People will then know it's an agricultural data set or a health science one. In terms of item, as I said, this will take posters and photos and other things, but in this instance, we're using data. So just use your data set. In the description, and we'll just go to the next slide. Probably, I would say the quickest thing is to actually just cut and paste the abstract from your manuscript, and it describes the analysis that was done. You could add a little sentence at the top which says this data set was used in the following research paper, and then put in the abstract. And I think that should give people enough of an idea of what we're talking about. Under funding, then again, it's the same acknowledgement as in your paper, and remember to acknowledge Sortit and the support. And then the references. Now this is where it's quite tricky because the reference is a web link, so the timing is a little bit chicken and egg. But essentially, what it would be the online link to the published manuscript. So it may well be when you first deposit your data here, you don't have access to that, or it hasn't been published yet. But don't worry, you can always save your changes and come back and edit at a later date. Okay, so it'll either be a URL or increasingly now, journals provide what is also called a digital object identifier, DOI, for every paper, which essentially is a URL link as well. Under license, the default is the Creative Commons Open Access License by Attribution, version 4, and that's the one we recommend you use. So just leave that. Certainly don't choose any other licenses. We don't need this, but if you were using this in another piece of research you do, you can actually apply an embargo, which means you put a sort of ticking clock on when these data would go live. And that may be the case. Perhaps you have some secondary analysis. You're using a data set for another piece of research, the same data set. And so you may put a delay on making this public, maybe 6 months, maybe 8, something like that. As I said, this is increasingly used for international collaboration, and I suspect quite a lot these days with the restrictions on travel. So you can generate a private link. Again, that's not what we are looking for in Sorted, but if you were doing a research collaboration with another team somewhere else, then you can provide them with a link and only they can then access and use the data. You need to reserve your DOI because these are unique. These are one-off numbers that link to your resource, and so they are what's called minted, almost like a coin is minted, and then you can use that, as I keep saying, in your published manuscript. At any point, you can save your changes and come back and re-edit and change and update and those types of things. And if you think you've really gone off the rails, so you can delete the whole thing. This will not go public until you click this little button here, and then it's published. And then when it's published, you can then use it. Well, it is the link that will then be live from your manuscript. People can read your data management plan, click on the link, and it'll take them to this site. So the actual data and the files are uploaded after this. Once you've saved the changes, so if I then go back, here is the place where you then drag your file in. So as I said, you can either drag your file and drop it here and then go and fill in the details, or you fill in the details first and then drag your file to be uploaded here. I like to make sure I've checked all the boxes before I do that. Maybe that's just me. So as I said, just go through the list. It's pretty straightforward. And then what you then end up with is 2 choices. So in your final manuscript, under the data management statement, you have 2 choices. One would be the metadata record of the data used in this paper is available at, and then this is the DOI. It'll be a unique number that you'll have, and it'll be a live link, like a web link. Requests to access these data should be sent to the corresponding author, and then that gives you the option of how you then subsequently deal with somebody wanting to either use or reuse the data you've done. Ideally, we'll be able to deposit the full data set that was used in your paper, and then you can use this statement as your data management plan. So the data set used in this paper has been deposited at DOI, blah, 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 and is available under a Creative Commons by license. And that means people are aware they don't need to contact you to ask for the reuse because it's covered by this license. And what this license means is they are free to reuse the data, but they have to attribute it. So they need to cite your work and those data. So if you have any questions on that, please don't hesitate to contact me. Rob Terry, I'm part of the TDR team, and that's my email there, terry@who.int. Okay, thanks very much.